So welcome again to Churches Together in Cornwall as we continue our daily prayers and reflections for the Week of Prayer for Christian Unity 2022. And a reminder that all the previous reflections from this week can still be seen on Facebook and YouTube and on our webpage ctcinfohub.org/WPCU22. So today we reach day 5 and our speaker is the Reverend Elizabeth Foot from the Church of England, who joins us from the wilds of West Penwith. So thank you, Elizabeth, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Roger, for your introduction and arranging all this for us. And especially thank you for overnight finding some pictures for my tour. Well, good afternoon and welcome to the depths of Nancledra in the far west of Cornwall to the Week of Prayer Service 2022. And of course, we've reached day 5. With the well-known verse from Matthew's Gospel. Ahead of them went the star that they had seen rising, which introduces the theme for today, guided by one God. Many years ago, when I first started working and began earning a real salary, the thing I most wanted to do was to visit Israel, which was a life-changing experience. Because after my visit, every time I read the Bible or heard words of scripture, I could picture the place mentioned and found it transforming, making the scriptures come alive. As I was researching the passages set for today, I noticed that Psalm 121 was considered to have been written not by David, but by Hezekiah. King Hezekiah had great faith and was obedient to the Lord, insisted that only God should be worshipped, and removed all the idols from the temple in Jerusalem. It brought back memories of my first trip to Jerusalem. Hezekiah was a very forward-thinking king because he constructed a channel cut in the rocks 700 years before Christ's birth to bring fresh water into the city, known as the Siloam Tunnel, which must have been quite a feat in those days, cutting through the rock by hand. This has become, in more recent years, a popular pilgrimage attraction to walk through the 500+ metre tunnel. I think it's probably a lot safer than it was 45 years ago, with the advent of many health and safety regulations. In that picture, it looks quite safe, really. I noticed when I was in Jerusalem just before lockdown, it seemed to become more of a tourist attraction, with an entry charge, long queues, and a number of very official-looking guards. There was no concern during our visit about falling rocks or a very uneven surface to walk on, or that the water level was unexpectedly up to 1 metre deep, so we got very wet. On one level, it was really quite scary as we walked through the tunnel. We did not really know where we were going as we embarked on our adventure through a very dark tunnel, bent over because the roof was not very high and jagged rocks projected from the sides. There was no light. The comfort came through the fact that we were walking in single file, just following slowly the person in front, one hesitant step at a time, following our guide, who we hope knew where we were going, and trying to support those who were totally terrified. After about 20 minutes, there was the relief and the joy of seeing the light ahead of us and emerging into bright daylight again. Strangely, we chose not to go back the way we came. So we have Psalm 121 with its theme that we can depend on God. As pilgrims through life, we may travel through lonely places to our destination, guided and protected, not by anything created, but by the creator of all things, the Lord himself. And I'm reading Psalm 121 from the Revised Standard Version. I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. At your right hand, sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. Our second reading is a very well-known gospel passage, heard at every carol service, and of course to mark the feast of the Epiphany. Matthew's account of the Magi is one of contrast, showing how God's salvation has come through Christ, who had overcome the divisions between Jew and Gentile to all people, even those we think of, so many who make pilgrimages in search for what they most seek, those on the margins, because the Messiah has come for us all. Some years ago, I made a day pilgrimage to Iona Abbey. You will know that it's on a remote Scottish island where St. Columba established a missionary community in the 6th century. Iona has become an ecumenical Christian community that has links all over the world. So on August Day, we piled onto a ferry, taking us the short distance from Mull to Iona, with visitors from all over the world. And I think that ferry looks far more substantial than the one that we travelled on. I was sat at the back with a very chatty ferryman. I asked him what he thought of the Abbey as we looked across the bay to see it. To my amazement, he said he'd never been. He'd operated the ferry for over 30 years, but had never walked the 150 yards from the landing place to the Abbey, which people from all over the world were travelling to see. Within the Abbey, although there were many pilgrims just coming and going, there was that deep sense of peace and Christ's presence with us, and that feeling that after the journey we had arrived at a holy place, a thin place. Time to be still and to worship and offer all that we had, which was simply ourselves. Although for many a pilgrim after a long journey, they return home just to discover that the good news is just on the doorstep, if only they'd recognized it. We felt blessed by our journey. So we turn to our gospel reading from Matthew's Gospel. Chapter 2. Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time that the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and make careful search for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I too may go and worship him." After they'd heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they'd seen in the east went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, And they bowed down and worshipped. They opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and incense and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. We turn to the reflection set for today. Again and again, the scriptures tell us how God walks with us. The path may not always be straight, and sometimes we are led to retrace our steps, sometimes to return by a different route. But in all our journeying through life, we can be confident that God, who neither sleeps nor slumbers, is with us when we slip or fall. Even in the greatest darkness, God's light is with us. Most perfectly in the fullness of time, God sends Jesus Christ, who is the guiding light for all nations, the glory of God in the world, the source of divine light and life. The way ahead into unity with one another, into closer unity with Christ, is not always clear. In our earnest attempts to build unity ourselves, it's all too easy to lose sight of this fundamental message of the scripture, that God does not abandon his people, even in their failures and diversiveness. This is God's message of hope for the whole world. As the story of the Magi reminds us, God guides people of all kinds by the light of the star to where Christ, the light of the world, is to be found. The prayer set for today, and please feel free to join in with us, muted or unmuted. God, our God, you sent the star to lead the Magi to your only begotten Son, filled with the confidence that you are walking with us. Open our eyes to your Spirit and encourage us in our faith, so that we may confess that Jesus is Lord and worship him as the Magi did in Bethlehem. There's a hymn verse set for today, a hymn I do not know, written in 1893, but I feel that the words are just as relevant for us today. Hope of my heart, strength of my soul, guide thou my footsteps and keep me whole. My grace and fortress thou wilt be. Oh, let thy mighty hand ever lead me. One of the interesting thoughts about the wise men in our gospel reading is that they each brought their gift for the Lord. Sadly, in our world today, many seem to be concerned with the question, what's in it for me, rather than what can I give? What have I offer to others? What can I give to my Lord? Often people have been through difficult challenges. Often we don't know about them. And until they receive that love and care, they may not be able to offer of their own resources. I think each of the questions set for the day in the go and do challenges us and gives us that opportunity to offer our gifts to the Lord. And I'm sure that you find, like me, that maybe you're not aware of what you give by being a Christian presence in your community to all you meet, because the Lord is Lord of your life and you are guided by one God. So under the questions, global, as a global community, we continue to face many challenges. How do we seek God's guidance in our response to those challenges? Surely as Christians, we seek the Lord in all things, asking for God's guidance to respond to the needs of the world day by day. And then locally, we're asked, how is God guiding your Christian community at this time? Where are you being called to act? Hopefully we are coming out of a pandemic, and I find a lot of people need a lot of extra support just to encourage them to enjoy life again and not to be afraid. And then thirdly, the question asked us today, reflect on a time when you felt or seen God's guidance. What was it like? It is the most amazing thing to feel guided by God. One of the joys of my ministry is being hospice chaplain. People often ask me, what do you say? Because it's a case of praying for guidance. I don't have any answers of myself, but I need to seek the Lord to help me through. I often find myself saying things which I never expected to say. I can remember one day going to see a lovely lady, and I'd seen her several times. And one day I just blurted out, have you been baptized? I was rather surprised that I'd even broached the subject, to which she replied, oh yes, please, when can you do it? It's that sense of being guided by the Holy Spirit and knowing God's guidance to offer to those in need, which has been the theme for today, guided by